Hey, thanks for being a part of the conversation. Let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 314 is with Lars Jacobson, the host of the podcast Fodor's Guide to Espionage. Lars, I really love the way that you are presenting this based on a true story adventure because, you know, I grew up in the age of radio mystery theater. So when I get to hear actors bring history forward, it really does get inside my imagination more than just a narrative.
Completely agree. That was honestly, that's what inspired me, is that not only can we tell this fictional story but inject him into real historic events, because while all of the historical events are real, the places are real, he was a real person. I tried to include as many real individuals in these historic events as possible. We don't know exactly what his involvement was in these moments. So we had the flexibility to tell these stories, inject him kind of into the periphery or in the middle of these events, and really express the history, as well as, you know, telling a very dynamic spy mission. So it really kind of it includes the history, it includes a high-stakes spy mission, and it takes the audience on an exotic vacation every week, because he was a travel writer going to hotels and restaurants and, locations, historic locations, and food and wine. And so it touches on a lot. It really kind of combines the James Bond spy mission with the Anthony Bourdain kind of travel writer experience.
I'm a big fan of the Travel Channel, and so therefore, when the way that Eugene explains the different hotels and things like this, I mean, I feel like that. Oh my God, I'm stepping into this building. I'm going to experience this, especially when it comes to the wine. And then you realize, wait a second, there's a storyline going on here, but I just love the way that you combine both of them.
To me, that's what made the story so dynamic. There's plenty of spy stories out there. It's been done many times. I'm a huge fan of the 60s era spy show, you know, the I Spy, the Mission Impossible, the Man from U.N.C.L.E., the Bond series. And back then, it really was about tradecraft. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about those type of events, but it was also about, you know, we get to have fun with the relationship with his wife, who he ran his company with, and she may or may not have known exactly what he was involved in as working for the CIA and using their company as cover. So we get to have fun with that dynamic as well. And kind of, so while we're doing a spy mission and dealing with Cold War events and taking people on an exotic vacation, we also get to watch this couple build, you know, kind of a startup from scratch and kind of see how they build their business into one of the most iconic travel writing company. I mean, they still, to this day, I think they have 700 permanent writers around the world. God. They sell hundreds of millions of copies of guidebooks. So he's had a huge influence on the travel industry, as well as obviously the world and politics and who knows what else. But yeah, he's an incredibly dynamic character, and it's such a dynamic story. When I came across it, I said, wow, this includes all the things that I love. And it's such an amazing way to tell a story that's based on fact, but includes so much.
Oh my God, you talk about they have 700 writers. I mean, your story begins right there where they're struggling to find out if they're even going to get re-signed. And she wants to go get that office in New York City so she can have a small little staff. I mean, you take it from the dang seed here, dude.
Absolutely. To me, it was really so interesting, all of these different threads and storylines, and to kind of keep all these plates spinning and to see how they negotiate all of these different worlds that they're straddling, and while maintaining their loving relationship, which was all, you know, true. They remained married for 40 plus years until his death. I mean, it was a long, passionate relationship, and they also grew this business together. So yeah, to me, it's such an interesting character, such an interesting world.
Speaking of characters, I think one of the most invisible characters in the storyline is their love for each other. I mean, even their friend says, you guys are acting like you're newlyweds.
Yeah. And to me, it was all about their relationship at the center. Mm-hmm. And for him, dealing with, I mean, you make compromises with all the choices you make, but you don't want to, for him, his biggest risk and his biggest priority was his wife and their love and their marriage, but he also didn't want to endanger her. So, you know, of course, he doesn't want to lie to her, but he doesn't want to endanger her as well. And he knows what he's working on has global ramifications that also will help protect her and hopefully help chart their future. So it is a huge balance. And I think anyone who works in that world and has those type of responsibilities while maintaining those relationships, it's hard to juggle. It's hard to maintain.
Did you have to do some research on kind of the sexiness of it? Because it does open up with them, with the ocean and the water and things like that, and him talking about he would rather see her naked than see the other women in swimsuits and stuff. I liked it because I'm a guy, but as a podcaster, I'm going, ooh, did he have to do some research to find out if that was crossing the line?
You know what? To me, it's more. It is not. There's nothing explicit in the thing. It's just about their relationship and their love and their romance. And so, while it's they were heavily romantic and loved each other deeply, it was also a very interesting time. The early '60s. It was the beginning of the bikini, and it was second wave feminism, and it was sexual liberation, and there were a lot of changes that were going on societally in addition to politically and around the world. So I thought that was also a really fun element to kind of inject what was happening culturally around them. And so to start in a place like Monaco and Monte Carlo, which is such a sexy, exotic, fun, wild, rich place. But it's also incredibly contained, and things that you learn through the process. Yeah, I did a ton of research. Like one, for example, that Monaco is the size of Central Park. So like things like that, where you don't realize the dimensions of certain things in Europe, and even though it's the most high, the per capita, the richest, but also the most highly dense, country in the world. So it's all these little details that added elements.
In the story and in real life, I love how during the Grand Prix, the world is watching the race, but the world is meeting behind the scenes, all of those decision makers.
Yeah, to me also, like the Grand Prix, the Monte Carlo Grand Prix, it's the most exotic, most famous, motorsports event really in the world. And it all takes place in the streets of this small community. And so, again, to have this really fun, exotic, prestigious, sexy race going on. And it's also the perfect diversion if you're doing something like a spy mission and meeting people in secret, or trying to attempt an assassination, or, all of the, it can happen around this because, of course, the population is relatively small for Monte Carlo. But when 40,000 spectators are in the city, then it becomes a whole different dynamic.
I'm blessed with the opportunity to talk with a lot of these travelers that are connected up to the National Geographic. And I'll tell you what, you opened up my eyes with Eugene, because later on tomorrow, I'm going to be with Joe Yokerst, who's got 50 states and 1,000 eats. And I'm going to ask him if he's a spy, because you're making me believe that all these people are spies.
I actually came across this while researching another project. And once I discovered his story, and I realized a travel writer makes the perfect spy. I mean, he spoke 11 languages. He can move freely without suspicion. He can conduct surveillance. He understands cultures and communities. So and he had relationships everywhere. So it kind of makes the ideal spy, the ideal cover. And so once I kind of realized that, and then he was a real person dealing with real events during the Cold War, which was maybe the most high stakes period, trying to avoid a nuclear annihilation and leading up into the Cuban Missile Crisis. It just seemed like all the ingredients for such a great series.
Well, you kind of lead us up into that what if kind of factor, in the way that, wow, what if we had gone into World War III? I mean, Eugene was really mixed in with a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, that year is an incredible period of time. And that's also what you kind of forget when you're not looking at the big picture. You hear about all these events, but you don't realize sequentially how one might have led to another. And here in the series, we, hop from city to city, and every city that we go to, for example, in London, he helps expose the Portland spy ring, which is the largest intelligence breach in British history. And that was a real event and involved actors that were involved in the stealing of the Manhattan Project. I mean, this is a really big story and really big event that most people probably still aren't really aware of. And then, he goes to Rome, and there was Operation Gladio, which was this real network that was created of leave behind armies and weapons caches that were meant for NATO in case the Soviets invaded Western Europe. And so we get to kind of play in that playground. And then he goes to Berlin, and we get to talk about the origins of the Berlin Wall being constructed overnight. And we get to, kind of intimate that maybe the motivation was to help him stop him from defecting with the KGB's top forger. So we get to kind of have fun within those worlds and those events. And then, all kind of leading to, we go to Paris, we go to Prague, and then we even go to Cuba, and he helps, expose the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we get to touch on all these huge historic events and inject him into the kind of the center or the periphery of them, and really have a fun, high-stakes spy mission that's infused with real history and real people, while also taking the audience on this really fun, exotic vacation where they get to experience other tastes and sounds and locations that, some people might be aware of that are famous locations, but also probably be introduced to new places that maybe if people are ever in these corners of these cities, they might come across or be interested in investigating.
Oh my God. I mean, the way that you introduce Havana into the scene, because them talking about get rid of your Russian accent, you've got to speak clearer and more with English. And then he says, we're going to Havana. My God, that was such a huge hit in the unexpected heart, because I was like, oh, I never even thought about Cuba. But yeah, it totally sets it up.
It really does. And that was amazing to me, too. Operation Anadir, which was the operation to smuggle the nuclear weapons into Cuba, was a huge operation. And they had to pretend, I think they were a Norwegian crew, and they were just transporting farm equipment. And of course, it was, maintaining secrecy was of the utmost importance, because, of course, the moment that the U.S. or JFK found out that there were nuclear weapons on their way or present in Cuba, it would have changed the entire global dynamic, which, of course, it did once it was discovered.
So much of the Cold War is really something that we've all set aside. And I think that this podcast is going to remind people that this was fact. It really did happen. And that so much of that Cold War is starting to build again. And it kind of just opens up your eyes to the reality of today.
Absolutely. I mean, I think basically you can look at it's history, but things have not changed, and history repeats itself. And the circumstances are remarkably similar and scary. And obviously Oppenheimer was a big story, and it has shown a new light on nuclear proliferation. And the threat is still out there. You hear it even last week, Putin talking about using nuclear weapons in the here and now. And so the idea that those were right off of our coast and could have reached the entirety of the United States was pretty shocking and pretty scary. And it's really not so far-fetched.
When I think of a 1960s spy series, I always think of a black and white television show. While you were writing and producing this, were you thinking black and white?
I was definitely thinking I wanted to keep it in the fun kind of terms of a 60s era spy show. I liked the fun and the feeling of the North by Northwest, the Cary Grants of it, really put Eugene in that category of character and figure, because he really was. This was a guy who could, negotiate with a camel herder at a Marrakesh market, or, go to the Royal Opera and have a conversation. He was just incredibly diverse. And for me, it was just really important to, demonstrate that and to really hopefully have him embody those 60s era characters. But to me, it was also, nowadays spy shows are everywhere, and it's all high tech and facial recognition software and encryptions. And back then it was tradecraft. It was very personal and intimate, and it was boots on the ground and figuring out dead drops. And so to me, the spy craft itself was just so much more engaging, because it relied on the human factor so much more.
Wow. Lars, I got to be honest with you. Over the past couple of weeks, I've had the blessed opportunity to talk with two spies, a French spy and an American spy. And now we're talking about Eugene, who is a spy. I mean, is this spy month or something? Because, there are so many. Are they still spies if they come out of hiding and talking about it?
I do think eventually, once they hang up their credentials, that they are a little more open to talking about things broadly. But of course, there are top secret things that I'm sure they can never speak of. But yeah, it's really amazing who was involved and who maybe played a part in some of these, in the spycraft world. And it is such an interesting world to explore because of the human dynamic and dealing with the political, landscape and maintaining relationships. And yeah, I think it's a really it creates a lot of tension and a lot of complexities. And obviously they're doing important work. So yeah, I think spies I think it's getting harder and harder to do nowadays. But they've played a very significant role in shaping this world.
Speaking of roles, they would have 5 and 6 different roles that they would have to play. What about Eugene? Did he stick to being just Eugene?
Yeah, he did. And that was what was really, I think, fortunate for him. But and we do play with that, as you see in the first couple episodes, even of, how does he maintain the role of husband and business owner while juggling the responsibilities of being a spy. I think that, he had a very loving relationship and a long marriage to his wife, and all of those things were true, and they ran the business together. But dealing with the push-pull of lying to the one you love, but also wanting to protect them and make sure that you're not risking, their health and well-being, and hopefully maintaining a future for them, but you're also dealing with hugely high stakes, relevant events that are important to saving, but not going to be very significant if there's a nuclear war. So, I think it's that balance of maintaining relationships and maintaining your personal life while balancing the abilities of these huge moments.
Do you ever find yourself wondering, what would I have done if I would have been approached?
Yeah, I have to say, I would find it very difficult in a lot of ways, because you are putting yourself at risk, but you also understand the significance of it. And for someone like Eugene, who was not American by birth, and he saw the events of World War II, and he saw how the world changed and the effects of fascism. And I think it really played a huge part in making him realize that if he didn't do what he could to help, preserve democracy and freedom, that there was a big threat out there that, maybe it couldn't be preserved. And so I would hope I would make the same decisions he did. He was absolutely a hero. He absolutely used what he could in his abilities to the benefit of the world, while maintaining a healthy relationship and building a tremendous company. So it's pretty inspiring, but yeah, it's also, I think, a pretty heavy responsibility.
You talk about Eugene being a hero, and like I said before, I mean, you're really kind of showcasing Eugene and his wife before heroism steps in. I mean, and I love that, because I mean, even in the very beginning, you realize that even though they're in these beautiful hotels and stuff, he kind of clearly states to his wife that you don't have to be rich to travel well.
Absolutely. And I think for him, it was the experience, and one of the, like his famous quote was that when other people learn about other cultures, it's a lot harder to start a war. And he was a very big believer that travel was a way to open up the world and to, create better understanding. And yeah, I think, it's pretty amazing that he's now established a company that is still so prominent and has obviously influenced so many for so long.
Man, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future, dude. I love your storytelling capabilities. I just love everything that you're doing here, because it really does invite people to not only escape, but learn something, which is my father talking. Learn something.
You know what? I love that too. I really, that to me is the real fun part of, taking people on an adventure, but hopefully having people take something with them, be a conversation starter. And then if they're traveling through these cities, maybe go to some of these locations, look up some of this history. These are real places, real people, real events. And it's a lot of fun. To me, it was the type of thing I love to listen to. And certainly the thing I love to create.
Excellent. Well, you be brilliant today. Okay, sir?
Well, thank you very much. It was a true pleasure.